Hi, everybody. Kris Vallotton here. This month on Cultural Catalyst, we're diving into the most pressing issues of our time, the mental health epidemic. Now more than ever, people are struggling with anxiety, depression, fear, and even suicide. And I believe it's time to have real conversations about what's happening beneath the surface. That's why I'm launching this special series, and we'll bring on some special guests to talk about spiritual, emotional, practical aspects of mental health and how do you actually get free. This is a topic I'm deeply passionate about, and it's a big reason why I wrote my book, Deliver Us from Evil. In it, I explore the unseen battle of our minds and the powerful tools God has given us to break free.
That panic attack was the most out of control I've ever felt. I thought I was dying. My next door neighbor's a police officer. I almost asked my wife to go wake him up and ask him to put me in handcuffs because I thought I was going to hurt myself.
Yeah. Hi, welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. And today, I have Levi Lusko. Did I get it right?
Close enough.
Okay,
Lusko.
try it.
Lusko.
There we go.
It's Czechoslovakian. People have a hard time with it.
I was going to say, man, hey, thank you so much for being on Cultural Catalyst. And, you know, it's Mental Health Month, so we're getting some folks on that, you know, have had a big impact in that realm. And before we talk too much about that, I would love for you to tell my audience exactly who you are. I know you're a pastor. You've got, I think, 4 or 5 locations. Montana's your main one. And you've written a really great book, which we're going to talk about. Blessed are the spiraling. Before we do that, I'd love for our audience to get introduced to you. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, you know, how you became a Christian, and a little bit about your family.
Yeah. Well, Kris, thank you for having me. I've seen your teaching, and it's just, thank you for your ministry and example. I have a rich tradition of history coming from my father. He's a first generation Christian. He and my mom both have no Christianity before them in the family tree. So they both got radically saved in the height of the Jesus movement.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. My dad's story is powerful. He graduated from college with a broadcasting degree, but was very disillusioned because he saw the emptiness of his parents. Like, they were super wealthy, but there was no richness of soul. And so he decided to just drop out and move to Hawaii and save the whales and join Greenpeace. Wow. And ended up coming to know Jesus in a really powerful way. He showed up at a church because he was trying to decide between Buddhism and Christianity. He knew Jesus and Buddha were going to be one of his next thing. So he got to, literally on Front Street in Maui, there was a Buddhist temple and across the street a Christian church. And he was like standing there in the middle of the street trying to decide which one to go in. And he ended up in the Christian church, but he was the only person that showed up for the service that night. No one else came but him.
Oh my gosh.
He sat in the back row, and the pastor, to his credit, went through the whole service like it was a full house. Even did an altar call at the end. If anyone's here tonight and wants to come to Jesus. And my dad went forward at the altar call, the only person in the room. And so that began the spiritual legacy I get to stand on now.
That's amazing.
My mom simultaneously got saved at Campus Crusade for Christ. And then, at the age of 2, I told my parents I wanted to be a pastor one day. And so was raised in church, knowing God, always being a part of the house. And we started a church when I was 21. My wife was 22, and we've been leading, loving the church, writing books. We've published 10 books already, and love the power of the written word, seeing people interact with Jesus. And
you wrote 10 books?
Yes.
By the time you were 22?
No. I started the church at 21.
Oh.
My wife was 22. I've written 10 books so far.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And where your first church was in Montana, the one you're in right now?
Yep, Kalispell, Montana.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and what city is it in?
Kalispell.
Oh, I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah, I've been to that city 2 or 3 times.
Wow, what for?
That's amazing because I did a conference there like more than once. I was trying to think of the people I was with. It wasn't. It was different people than you are with, obviously.
Well, we need to hang out next time you're here for sure.
And so, who did you plant a church with? What kind of a church have you planted?
So we didn't plant it with anybody. We just planted it. It started as a Bible study, 14 people the first week, and it has grown from there. I grew up in the Calvary Chapel family of churches.
Oh yeah,
but we're grateful for our upbringing, but we didn't continue on with that.
So
network.
really, nobody sent you guys out. You just kind of went out by yourselves, started a little home group, and it turned into a church.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I was a teaching pastor at a church in California before, and the church was gracious enough to send us with an offering. You know, they contributed towards it.
Wow.
And some of the members of the church continue to this present day will continue to support what we're doing.
Where were you at in California?
San Juan Capistrano.
Oh, I know where that's at. And what church were you with there?
It was called Ocean Hills Church. It was a 100-year-old community church.
That's
and
amazing.
I was the teaching pastor there when we left. It now is a campus for a church called Mariners.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And you guys were 21 and 22.
Yeah, that was 2007, back when we did that, pre-iPhone.
That's amazing. And so you came to faith where?
I was a freshman in high school. I had grown up my whole life knowing Jesus, about Jesus, but the big kind of repentance moment and being filled with the Holy Spirit and all of that took place as a freshman. So I like to say, you know, I had already decided I was going to be a pastor before I was even saved. So it was, once I got that sorted out, it was all engines running.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the books that you've written, have you and your wife, do you co-write?
We co-wrote one called The Marriage Devotional, but and she's written on her own as well. We've not agreed to write another one yet together. Maybe the experience, well, maybe that'll tell you.
Good way to save your marriage right there.
I don't know. It was fun. We're very different in our writing processes. So we had to coalesce that. I'm more of the stormy creative, often the staring into the black, kind of like I come out of that day's writing session with 1,000 words or whatever, but her process is a little different.
That's cool. What are some of the themes that you've written about? I know we're going to talk about this last book that you just wrote, but I'm really curious as to what you do.
My first book is called Through the Eyes of a Lion. It's about how to face impossible pain but find incredible power. Wow. It was written out of my daughter going to be with Jesus as a 5-year-old. She was in kindergarten. She had an asthma attack, and that experience, her nickname was Linya Lion, and Linya means lion in Russian, so it's like a play on words. And she was that way. She was this little lion cub. And when she went to be with Jesus, we were able to donate her corneas to a nonprofit that gives cornea transplants to people who are blind.
Wow.
And so 2 people received her corneas, and they see through her eyes. They see through the eyes.
Gosh, that's amazing.
So Through the Eyes of a Lion is this metaphor for, seeing through faith. And what's cool about that story is that it's just an invitation for people, whatever their grief story is or pain story is, to find power in their pain. That the Lion of the tribe of Judah wants to roar through their pain and to turn it into power. And so that was my first book I wrote in 2015.
That had to be a complete shock, especially an asthma attack. How long did it take you to, the mourning process had to be a while.
To the present day, of course, in some degrees, but
sure, of course,
because you don't ever really get over a grief like that, or maybe any grief, but you do get through it. And so, but I would say for me, it was 1 year of real brutal grief. The first year was very tough, but what was great was, the Lord was near me. He comes near to the brokenhearted, and there was a richness of revelation in the thinness of she went to literally with my breath in her lungs to be with Jesus. So the thinness of the veil of that moment and the treachery of that pain mixed with the presence of Jesus in it.
Oh my gosh.
I vowed to not lose any of the lessons he gave me in that year. So every day I wrote something, and that's what ended up becoming the book.
Oh my gosh. That's a story. And was she your oldest or your youngest?
Second born. So we had a 5-year-old who was the one who died, a 7-year-old, a 1-year-old, and I think a 6-month-old. We had an infant in arms, and then we now have one more son.
Well, I almost said that's a beautiful story. That's a really hard story.
It is a beautiful story. You know, honestly, Kris, it's maybe we should say it's a brutal story because there's beauty and brutality to it.
Yeah.
And God, but I would not trade any of the things God taught me in that, the nearness.
I almost lost our 8-year-old daughter. She had grand mal seizures for a year. And, but almost and having it happen is quite two different things. But the grief of being right on the edge was, I can't even imagine that ending that way. Whoa, whew, I'm sorry. I'm kind of fighting off my own grief. Okay. You've been open about experiencing panic attacks during that season. How did you walk through the season? How did you find freedom? How long did it last?
Well, the season of panic attacks started when I was 38. So I'm 42, about to be 43. This was almost 5 years ago. I kind of hit this point that I kind of looked back on as a midlife crisis where I was kind of done with my young man stage and not quite to my old man stage. And I was very much unfamiliar with midlife. And so I think that's what I look at it now. In the moment, it just was, I'm terrified at bedtime, heart racing, hands sweating, having like almost feeling so out of control that I need to like get myself locked up or something like that.
Yeah.
So that happened at bedtime. And then, that began a year-long process of God really doing some deep work in me that partially was just some stuff that had happened when I was a child that I had never really dealt with, that I needed to get into counseling and kind of learn to think about correctly and understand some patterns that shaped me and how I developed some kind of defense mechanisms that just were stuck inside me. Part of it too was just the pace I had been running at. My 20s and 30s, I was going. I went to Australia and South Africa twice, both times just for the weekend.
Wow.
Each of those countries, 4 different trips like that. And then I would hit the ground back and on to the next thing and this, and then writing and publishing and leading. And I just think man cannot live by sugar-free Red Bulls alone,
Exactly. Well, they're actually one of the food groups though. So please don't bring conviction on the Twinkies. If you don't mind.
I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to say I was not taking care of my margin.
Did you take medication?
I had to for a while.
Yeah.
I got put on a Xanax prescription because the next morning that was the scariest. That panic attack was the most out of control I've ever felt. I thought I was dying. My next door neighbor's a police officer. I almost asked my wife to go wake him up and ask him to put me in handcuffs because I thought I was going to hurt myself.
Yep. I know.
And so the next day I met with my doctor and did a panel to see if it was hormonal or testosterone or, if I had a tumor. Everything checked out. Met with the counselor, but then I also had to get off pre-workout. So I had been taking this pre-workout that basically I found out later was like 4 cups of coffee, which is too much when I was already drinking 4 cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And then I also,
so some of it was, diet. Some of it was external stress.
And then some of it was also, I think, just stage of life.
Had your daughter already passed by then?
Oh, yeah. That was when I turned 30. So this was 8 years later.
Oh, 8 years later. Okay. So it didn't have anything to do with that, the grief.
I mean, 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, I guess in some ways it did. And honestly, Kris, I would say partially, part of my response to my daughter's death was to bury myself in ministry.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, I had this thing I would say, like, I'm going to make the devil pay. I'm going to make the devil pay. So like every speaking invitation to give that story, every time I was like, I felt some sense of closeness to her when I would use that. So I think in a sense it did, because the body keeps score, just all the miles.
Yes, it does. Levi, how did that affect your wife and your marriage when you crashed?
The panic attack season?
Yeah.
Well, she was so kind to me. I mean, I'm grateful. I woke her up and said, "I need you to pray for me. I need you to help." And she, walked through that with me. she was also simultaneously going through her own, women have, of course, premenopause and menopause and
Yes, of
all those
course.
things, perimenopause. So she was simultaneously dealing with her own level of spiraling. And so what was hard was catching the sync of our spirals to
Yeah.
be able to be strong for each other when we both felt like we didn't have a lot of margin.
Did you go through any season of depression, or was it mostly anxiety?
Mostly anxiety. I don't skew depressive. Hyper anxious though. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was 22, I had a nervous breakdown, lasted 3.5 years. Started the same exact way. Panic attack. Yeah, I thought I was going crazy. But mine lasted 3.5 years. I didn't get any help. I was with the Jesus people, and that was kind of like, it was kind of off limits to take medication. And in those days, it was very common for them to put you in a mental hospital. I didn't want to be put in a mental hospital. So I just kind of pushed through it. And then about 3.5 years into it, I had an encounter. I knew the Lord from the time I was 18. I had radical conversion. So I was a Christian when all that happened. But I had very similar, like I was drinking like 10, 15 Cokes a day. I had a very stressful job. I was, very young, and I was leading 13 guys, managing 13 guys in a repair shop. And I didn't have any leadership ability, I don't say ability, but it's training. So yeah, it was really, and then I had a panic attack, but then the fear of having another one created panic attack after panic attack.
That's the worst thing about it, is the next night, is it going to happen again?
Yeah.
But in answer to your question about medicine, the doctor gave me a Xanax prescription, which was so helpful because just knowing I had the fire extinguisher to put it out if it was going to happen was helpful. And that gave me the confidence to do the hard work to figure it all out.
Yeah.
Knowing that I had at least a tool at my disposal for when I needed it.
Yeah. When I was when it happened to me, of course, that was a lot longer ago, they gave me Valium. I actually went and got Valium. My doctor prescribed. I took it once, and it made me feel drugged, very different. And then 16 years ago, I ended up, through a whole bunch of circumstances, my son going through divorce, my daughter locking herself up in the room for a year, and absolutely almost no sleep. I ended up depressed on the couch for 6 months. So that was, and very suicidal, did not want to live. And I definitely took medication. Well, my wife came in after the 5th month. I got medication after 1 month. My leadership team said, "Don't take that, trust Jesus." I'm like, okay. When you're in that state, you can't hardly think anyway, right? My mind was just mush. And so about month 5, I'm still laying on the couch, can't leave the house, paranoid. And my wife's like, "I don't care what our leadership team says, you're taking medication." I took some medication, and took about 3 different ones before it actually, something positive happened. And they got me off the couch, and I took it for a year. But that was really scary too. Yeah. So what did you learn from all that?
A lot.
Thou shalt not work hard.
Well, I think one of the things I learned was how to rest going into busy seasons, not just coming out of them.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh my gosh, I've spent, now I just need a couple of days off or whatever. Resting into busier seasons so you have margin to attack them with.
That's great.
One thing that really helped me a lot. Proactive rest and rest when I don't feel tired, rest when I don't need it, taking time for myself, like half a day, go get lost in nature, hiking, trail running, running. I've picked up running, which I never liked running, but there's such a therapeutic cadence to it.
Yeah.
Sauna and cold plunging being a regular part of my rhythms of my life.
You cold plunge, bro? That helped you?
Without a doubt.
Oh, my son does that. Oh my gosh, you guys are crazy.
Yeah, getting into 30-degree water and then getting into, a 200-degree sauna, the contrast therapy of that, it's proven to help with anxiety. And,
Really?
I know it helps anecdotally for me with sleep too. I feel like it resets my circadian rhythms and all that. And then also, just saying no just as much as saying yes, like knowing no is a tool too, and knowing I have limits and I'm a mere mortal. And it really did help me a lot to connect some of the dots on the childhood stuff. I think we kind of get this, like you said, oh, therapy and blame it all on your childhood. But it's like, but it makes sense that there are patterns of generational stuff that get stuck in and things you experience that shape you. So connecting those dots helped me, because now those same old impulses to free someone out or armor up, like I feel them happening and can actually choose to be obedient to Christ instead of just, doing what the flesh wants you to do.
That's really good. Yeah. My father drowned when I was 3, and I had two violent stepfathers. So finally got out of the home at 17, got married when I was 20, and married I met my wife when she was 12. We got engaged when she was 13, which tells you how dysfunctional our houses were, right? The homes we came out of. Hey, so you wrote a book, Blessed Are the Spiraling. So I imagine we're already talking about some of that book, right?
Without a doubt, yeah. Just the idea that when we come up against a season where we feel like we're spiraling or disoriented, which can happen. I mean, we talk about midlife crisis, but there's also later life crisis, which is like empty nest season. But there's also early life crisis, which 3 out of 4 say that when they're 18 to 20, they feel some sense of disorientation and they feel like they've hit a wall. So the book is really just a guide with notes that I learned the hard way on how to turn hitting into a wall into a stair to spiral your way up. Because if we can spiral down, why can't we spiral up?
So good. What are some of the principles you've learned? I bet they're very similar to what I learned, kind of the hard way also.
Yeah, I think one thing is just to be less focused on only success and more focused on significance. So the way I put it in the book is, when you're in the peak of youth and, starting out, you kind of see yourself as like Luke Skywalker with the lightsaber, and you're going to go take on Darth Vader and bring down the Death Star. And that's fine. That's amazing. God gives the glory of a young man as his strength. There's a season for that. But there also needs to come a season where you develop the muscles to become an Obi-Wan Kenobi and take on your own Luke Skywalker. But then also, I think ultimately, and no one wants to, get there, but the Force needs Yoda too, And so I think learning to understand the seasons of life and not hate old age, but embrace the thought of like, hey, Yoda's got something to give to the Force too, because he's at the Yoda Academy teaching all these young people. So I think taking all the distilled wisdom and learning to, pass it on and multiply yourself. And because the alternative is being Saul, chafed at the thought of people singing Saul has slain his thousands, but David has tens of thousands, when you really should be more excited about the 10,000s that David's taken out than your own thousands.
It's really good. Are you anxiety free?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think it's more attention to manage than it is a problem to solve. And because I think some parts of that is a little bit of the thorn of the flesh and the part of the shadow side of a gift. My mind is quick and vision and races, and the shadow side of that is it can skew that way. But I think when I'm healthy and grounded and walking with Jesus and getting rest and eating well, I think those things they're present but manageable.
What are the warning signs? Long before you had a panic attack, well, if you were anything like me, I guess I'm superimposing my situation on yours, but there was warning signs. I just blew through all those stop signs, but they were there. Was there warning signs in your life?
Without a doubt. And I've learned now to spot them better. I had one last week. I think it's when you see the lights on a dashboard in your car, they're telling you something's wrong that you need to deal with it. For me, it's being able to self-regulate and spot the things. Like when I have a 7 reaction to something that normally would get a 2, it tells me something's going on. And usually it's not connected in any way. I find myself more easily fatigued, because when I'm at my best, even a massive thing like, someone quit off our staff or this happened over here, I can kind of normalize that. I can kind of, not catastrophize that. But when I'm like, the smallest little thing is causing me, like I remember one day, like no socks in my sock drawer. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to go on. I'm like, okay,
something's wrong, huh?
We might need a day off here. Okay. You're going to find your socks, but that's telemetry. That's telling you, that's a light on the dashboard going off saying, hey, something's wrong. That's why your brain is freaking out here.
Yeah, that's really good. I've learned rhythm, and I have to say I don't live in much anxiety anymore, but maybe, and when I do, it's an occasion. It's not a lifestyle, it's an occasion. But just like you have had to learn how to build rhythm. And I I play basketball. I hate running, that kind of thing, but play basketball 2 or 3 times a week. I have to say I have to do it religiously because I can tell, well, sometimes I'm traveling, whatever, and miss those days. And I can already tell that my body feels toxic. It's getting amped up. And I'm having a hard time sleeping, not sleeping super well. And all of that creates a new ecosystem where anxiety begins to grow. So, and I also learned that, I think you said it just with a little different words. Like, I've learned that sometimes I have more time, but I have no more soul. Like I think in American culture, especially leaders, we operate on a clock and a calendar, but we actually don't pay attention to our soul. And I think, David said in the Psalms, he said, soul, why are you in distress? And I've learned and learning, so I know it's an unfolding thing. I've learned and learning to have a relationship with my soul. And I find that sometimes my body's exhausted. Sometimes my body's fine. Sometimes my soul is exhausted. And I think running your life or managing your life around a clock and a calendar as the only criteria of how you do life is a major mistake.
I agree completely. And I think the more you are in tune with some of those things, like for me, when I am, my mind's like maybe jealous, or when I'm finding like myself just drawn towards online shopping, like those are things I'm trying to, my soul's trying to tell me something.
Yeah.
And it's not finding the rest it needs. It's not quieted like a weaned child. And so then it's like, okay, I actually need a rest. I need to find, and so just, I think learning to spot those things is really powerful.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, especially from looking back, that actually one of the 10 commandments was, you're going to take a day off. I know they turned it into a religious kind of idol, but like, we were actually created to unplug one day completely. And it's actually like, don't steal, don't commit adultery, and by the way, take a day off.
It's wild.
Is that wild?
Yeah, what's that one? It goes on to say, it shall also be for your animal, the foreigner, and the stranger within you.
Yeah.
And there's this Jewish rabbi that says the reason it says that partially is because when you don't take the day off, your soul will eventually feel like an animal, a stranger, and a foreigner inside your own body.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, can you imagine, like, the God of the universe is like, okay, I don't want you to kill. I don't want you to steal. I don't want you to commit adultery. Of course, don't love the Lord first, and don't have false gods. And by the way, always take a day off. And by the way, these are commandments, and there's only 10 of them. Especially don't break any of these.
It's important. Yeah.
It's just crazy, right?
And it's the only one that we kind of like, look at like as this cute, quaint thought. You know what I mean?
That's optional.
Yeah, we know, none of us think like, well, I only murder a few people, but like you said, it's put in the same category.
It's kind of crazy, right? How'd you learn? How can we learn to recognize God-given invitations in the hardest moments? Like, I don't know about you, but I see two sides. One, crisis Christians, which probably all of us are in some space, right? You have a crisis, and all of a sudden, you're running after God. You're deepening your relationship with God. And then when things are well, you're like, woo. And then the other side is how do you recognize in those hard moments that God's in those moments?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. We can, of course, point out the downside of the foxhole Christianity, where the only time we talk to God is a 911 call when he wants to be our best friend and right there with us and all the things. But on the positive side, it is a good thing that in trials we tend to call out to him. From the pit I cry out. God's not going, oh, you didn't call me when you were not in the pit.
Good point. That's right.
He's happy to hear from us, whatever it takes. And maybe it was that we came to the end of ourselves. That God, David said, before I was afflicted, I went astray. So sometimes the affliction of the trial is God's gracious mechanism of of disciplining us to bring us back to him. So the reason I say blessed are the spiraling, even though it does not feel like a blessing to spiral, is Jesus literally put it pretty clearly in the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are you when you are persecuted, when you're hungry, when you are poor in spirit, when you're mourning. In those times, we lean into God in a way. God knows we lean into him more, and he's near to our broken hearts. And so then it's this chance for us to recalibrate. It's for us to reprioritize, to have a heart of wisdom, remembering our end. And then we can make a better plan. And I love the thought that a football team gets to go into the locker room at halftime and come back on the field with a reset. And that, for me, was my midlife crisis moment of, all right, hey, let's have a new plan for the second half. Let's come on the field differently. Let's shake the Etch-a-Sketch clean a little bit and start brand new. And so that's kind of the blessing. Every time we hit rock bottom, there's only one way to go from there, and that's up.
You seem like you're still pretty, I use the word ambitious for lack of a better word. You seem like you're still growing. You're still pushing forward. You've got 4 or 5 churches now. I don't know you very well, so this is our first actually relational connect. And I'm wondering, like, when I think of someone who's had a crash and then kind of, a midlife crisis and a reset, I think maybe somebody who's like backed off a little bit and, maybe performance isn't that important, refocused, like what does life look like now compared to the way it did a few years ago?
Yeah, I really did struggle with apathy in the midst of it all, 38 to 40 that season. It was probably the only, and that was maybe the scariest thing to me, was a lack of drive.
A lack of drive. Wow.
A lack of drive. For 2 years, I really kind of was like, man, I don't know. And I had to pull back to some extent and heal. And during that time, that was happening. But at this point, I mean, I would say today, healthy, grounded, whole, I'm as ambitious or more than I've ever been, but I've installed a new scoreboard. And so I'm trying to pay less attention to just more, bigger, faster, and also like the markers of, hey, what other leaders am I opening up doors for? And who am I reaching that can reach my grandkids? And, the legacy play as opposed to just the Luke Skywalker play. It's trying to like put on my Yoda hat, or maybe I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, I don't know, but trying to say like, it's less just about what I'm doing and more about who I can help develop. So I think on my best day, I'm just learning to channel the ambition into those paths. Because there's this Ronald Rolheiser quote. He said, "Success still feels good in the second half of life. It just has less to teach us." So letting adversity teach what? It has less to teach us.
Got it.
So yeah, I still am driven, and I think God wants us to be driven. He wants this 3 talent to turn into 6, into 2 to 4. But I also think I'm learning to take as much joy in someone who I'm giving an opportunity to than just in me doing it.
Yeah. Your wife, what part of, do you guys lead together?
Yes. So we lead together. She speaks as well, preaches as well, pastors as well. And we're at a really neat spot. We're 20 years into our marriage. We just celebrated 20. I told you before we started, we went to Italy, and we're madly in love with each other. We've done a lot of hard work in our marriage. I feel like we've been through 3 or 4 different marriages just together. We saved the expense. Instead of having a bunch of marriages to each other, we just have developed. And I feel like I'm a different me, she's a different her, and it's very hot and new and exciting.
Yeah. Do you guys play the same role in church? Do you work alongside each other? Do you have same office?
Yeah, we it's different every day, because I think the kids are still young and we're homeschooling, and so it's messy, and it's not always the same. And also there's a lot of travel. I mean, I was in 6 states last week, and she was coming and going in 2 different states. So like we are a lot like ships in the night, but we're trying to sync those things up as well. So she preached last Sunday, I did this Sunday, and she oversees kind of more different things. She's got such a gift of hospitality. She's got a care for how our staff's doing. Every kid on staff who's a parent works for us gets a birthday present, they get anniversary present. She makes sure they're beautifully wrapped.
Oh
She
my
cares
goodness.
about those little details like that. So that's her though. That's just Jenny. She is the kind of person who walks into a room and notices you. I'm like, hey, how do I, you know what I mean? Like we're both different. We're very different people.
Yeah. Is she extroverted like you?
She's quiet. Jenny's the kindest person ever. She's fun and knows how to have a good time, but she's also doesn't suck all the oxygen out of the room.
Wow, that's powerful. There are a lot of marriages where people can't work in the same space. And we've been married 50 years and we've never not worked together. So we've owned 9 businesses together. And we came to Bethel and we started school ministry together. And we don't work right now we don't work in the same building, but we're on the same campus. And we play 2 very different roles. Like I don't know how it'd be if we were in the exact same space, Kathy's sounds like a lot like Jenny, where Kathy's like cares about all the details, every little thing. I'm like big picture, that's exciting. So what do you think the next 5 years looks like for you and your team and your church?
Well, we're really passionate about our youth conference. That's one of the things that kind of came out of this was me going, hey, how did I come to Christ? I came to Christ at summer camp. And so wanting to scale and pour gasoline on our youth conference, which we've been hosting the last 4 years, seeing students come in from all over the country. A group just signed up from Pennsylvania yesterday, which is amazing. And the unique thing about our conference, as opposed to, there's a million youth conferences around the country, is ours is entirely outside. So from the first song, this year we have Taya, Elevation Rhythm, Carrie Job, Cody Carnes. We've got Louis Giglio coming to speak again.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's all outdoors. So if it's raining, it rains on you while you're hearing the Bible taught. Christine Kane taught a whole sermon in the rain last 2 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And the kids, we encourage them to camp. So youth groups come in, family groups come in, and we have acreage with foresty trees, and they camp in tents, and then they walk through the forest to come to our sessions outside. And then, Montana's pretty beautiful in the summer.
It is
so
beautiful.
They go to the lakes, or they go to the national park, or they go to whatever. And so I'm as focused on that as just about anything. And so I definitely want to see that grow. And then we like to joke that it's like if Kevin Costner planned out the Passion Conference, that's what we're putting on.
Oh my. What's the name of your youth conference?
It's called Movement Conference.
Wow. How many kids come?
We're expecting this year 1,000 students coming to it. So
wow.
And it's only 4 years old. We've been growing it every year. But the continuing to lead. We're opening a prison church inside the Salt Lake City, a Salt Lake City Women's Correctional Facility on Mother's Day. So we just got the green light from the Department of Corrections to launch beautiful. That. We have one that meets in the Montana State Prison every single Sunday. And I love doing prison ministry. We got the chance to do a big service in San Quentin State Prison this last year, and
my cousin's in San Quentin.
Oh well, we baptized 80 men in San Quentin this last year. Maybe he was there.
That's beautiful. How large is your Montana church? Like, what's average?
Several thousand people in here, and then we also, the crazy
how many
thing,
did you say?
Several thousand.
Oh my gosh.
But then every single Sunday we'll have every single week we'll have about 80,000 people participate online with the church online platforms and all that.
Amazing.
So it's crazy that every person you see there's 100 you can't see is always kind of how we have to remind ourselves, because thank God to the internet, we have people all around the world getting to tune in, as you know very well.
Do you preach in your other churches in the other states?
Like worship nights, leadership stuff, but not on weekends.
Wow, that's a lot. Do you have a lot of staff?
Like about 38. So it's a pretty skeletal team.
Yeah, that's a small team for how much you guys are doing.
Yeah, we always have liked to say we outpunt our coverage.
You definitely do. That's amazing. Well, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? One piece of encouragement? Any last thoughts?
I think the big metaphor that I keep coming back to in the book is, you're going to choose tears either way, right? You're going to choose tears one way or the other. So you're either going to end up crying like Alexander the Great, who at 33 wept because he had conquered the whole world and there was nothing left for him to conquer and it didn't fulfill him. or you're going to end up choosing the tears of Jesus, who at 33 wept tears, not for himself, but for the world that he came to serve. So how much better to choose the tears of Jesus and not end up weeping like Alexander?
Wow. There'll be a lot of people that listen to this that connect to your story of losing your daughter. But you didn't lose her, but you sent her. Could you just pray for people that have been in that kind of situation and maybe not even a loss of a child, but that level of trauma? I would love for you we end in prayer for people like that.
Of course. Father, I'm so grateful that Jesus came to save us from ourselves and to save us from sin and death and hell. And thank you that in this already but not yet time where you've already defeated the enemy and you've already done everything necessary to usher in Eden again and bring us back to you, but we're waiting for it to be fulfilled on the outside, where the kingdom of heaven is within. One day it will be without, and we won't have to have faith because we'll see you. And I pray that for the brother or sister who's hurting, especially because of the loss of someone they love who's died in Christ, that they would be comforted by the fact that early to bed is early to rise, and they're not missing out on anything because they're with you. And however many years ago the death was, for me, it was 12 years ago or 13 years ago. We're not 13 years further from our loved one. We're 13 years closer to them. And every day we move closer to that day of being reunited. And I pray we would trust faith, God, today, that we wouldn't trust how things feel or seem, but what you say. And I pray for your Spirit to just give them comfort and peace and hope in Jesus' name.
Wow, that's
Amen.
beautiful. Thank you so much. Blessed are the spiraling. How can they get this book? You have a website?
blessedarethespiraling.com. Pretty straightforward.
We'll post it when we post this. Hey, Levi, great getting to connect with you, and love to stay connected, and maybe love to have you come out and speak at something we're doing out here. But
and you're in Reading, obviously.
Yes.
Man, I know Brian and Jen pretty well.
Oh yeah,
it's a joy to get connected with you as well.
Yeah, I've known Brian since he was 1 year old.
I imagine my wife actually came out. Jen did a big gathering of pastors at her house, and she came out.
That was 3 years ago or 4, right?
Yep. Well, it'd be a joy. So I'm grateful you had me on, and it was a joy to get to be connected with you as well.
And really great talking to you. And it does feel like we're brothers from a different mother. We've had so many of the same kind of experiences. I'm
grateful every time I get to hear that someone's made it through it too. So, we can keep encouraging those coming behind us.
It is. God bless you. Thanks, Levi.
Bless you. Thank you.